The moment Clara Bell spoke those three words, $30 million evaporated from the room. The billionaire's wine glass hung suspended midair. His executives froze. The shy waitress, the one they'd mocked for sport just seconds ago, had just identified their secret $500 million biotech acquisition by name and calmly explained why it would bankrupt them all within 18 months. Ethan Cross built empires by reading people, but he'd completely missed the woman refilling his water. This is the story of how a forgotten genius destroyed the man who buried her alive. Stay until the end, hit that like button, and comment your city so I can see how far this story travels. The crystal chandelier above table 7 threw fractured light across 32 ounces of the most expensive beef in Manhattan. Ethan Cross didn't touch his steak. He rarely did at these dinners. The food was theater, the wine was lubricant, and the real meal was always power. $500 million? Marcus Chen said, swirling his bourbon with the satisfied grin of a man who'd just robbed a bank legally. Signed, sealed, and completely off the radar. The board doesn't know, the press doesn't know, hell, half our own company doesn't know. Ethan allowed himself the smallest smile. Marcus was his CFO, brilliant with numbers but desperately hungry for approval, the kind of hunger that made men useful. Bionex is a sleeping giant, Jennifer Walton added, leaning back in her chair with the casual confidence of someone who'd clawed her way to chief operating officer by the age of 38. Their cancer therapeutic platform is revolutionary. We're getting it at a 70% discount because their CEO is an idiot who doesn't understand his own science. Or the market, Marcus added. They're bleeding cash, going under in 6 months. We swoop in, buy the IP for pennies, and we're pharmaceutical royalty by Q3, Jennifer finished. Ethan let them talk, let them celebrate. The Augustine Club didn't cater to people who asked about prices, and his team had earned the right to feel invincible tonight. The biotech acquisition had taken 8 months of shadow negotiations, shell companies, and enough NDAs to wallpaper his penthouse. His phone buzzed. Another message from his sister about his daughter Sophie's science fair project. He'd missed it, again. Sophie was 8 years old, being raised by nannies and weekend guilt, and Ethan told himself he'd fix it after this deal stabilized. He always told himself that. "Sir, may I refill your wine?" The voice was so quiet he almost didn't hear it. Ethan glanced up at the waitress hovering near his elbow, small, maybe 30, with dark hair pulled back so tightly it looked painful. Her name tag read Clara, in simple block letters. She kept her eyes down, her posture curved inward like she was trying to take up less space in the world. "Actually," Ethan said, and something cruel flickered through his chest. Boredom, maybe, or the need to remind himself he could make anyone dance. "We're celebrating a major business deal tonight. What do you think we should drink to mark the occasion?" Clara's fingers tightened on the wine bottle. I'm not sure, sir. Perhaps the sommelier—" No. Ethan leaned back, gesturing grandly. "I want your opinion. You seem like a woman of refined taste." Marcus snorted into his drink. Jennifer's smile turned sharp and hungry. They could smell blood in the water. "Come on," Ethan pressed, his voice taking on that particular edge he used in boardrooms when he wanted someone to squirm. "Surely you have thoughts on how people like us should celebrate. What's your professional recommendation?" The table had gone quiet. 4 other executives watched with the detached interest of people watching someone else's humiliation. Clara's face flushed. "The 2009 Chateau Margaux is exceptional." "That's boring," Ethan interrupted. "Everyone knows that. I'm asking what you would do. If you had just closed a $500 million biotech acquisition, how would you celebrate?" He shouldn't have said it. The number was supposed to be locked down tighter than Fort Knox. But he was 3 drinks in, high on his own success, and the look on this timid waitress's face was almost entertaining. Clara went very still. $500 million in biotech, she repeated softly, and something in her voice changed, something Ethan couldn't quite identify. "That's very specific." "Indeed it is," he said, leaning forward. "So, financial advice from the service industry? I'm all ears." The silence stretched for 3 seconds. 5. 10. Then Clara set down the wine bottle with careful precision. "I'd celebrate with something cheaper," she said quietly, "since you'll need the money for the lawsuits." Ethan's smile froze. "Excuse me?" The Bionex acquisition. Claire's voice was still soft, but each word landed with unexpected weight. That's what you're celebrating, isn't it? Therapeutic platform for adenocarcinoma treatment, $500 million for 68% equity and full IP rights. The temperature in the room dropped 20 degrees. How the hell? Jennifer started. But Clara kept talking, her eyes finally lifting to meet Ethan's. They were brown, he noticed. Very dark brown, and completely calm. Their phase 2 trials look promising on paper, she continued. 92% efficacy in laboratory conditions. That's what sold you. But the trial data is built on a statistical trick. They cherry-picked the patient subset, excluded anyone with prior treatment history, and buried the adverse events in a secondary appendix that none of your analysts bothered to read. Marcus had gone pale. That's proprietary information. That's public record if you know where to look, Clara said. The FDA published their preliminary review 3 weeks ago. It's buried in the approval backlog database, but it's there. Bionex's lead compound causes catastrophic liver failure in 18% of patients when combined with any standard chemotherapy drug, which means it can't be used in 80% of actual cancer cases. The market isn't 70% of what they're claiming, it's 12%, maybe less. She picked up the wine bottle again, her hands perfectly steady. The company isn't worth $500 million, she said. It's worth about $60 million, and that's being generous. You just overpaid by $440 million for a therapy that will never make it to market. The lawsuits will start the moment the FDA rejects their Phase 3 application, which they will, probably within 8 months. You'll be lucky to recover 15 cents on the dollar. Then she poured wine into Ethan's glass with the same mechanical precision she'd used all evening. So I'd recommend something inexpensive, she finished. The 2009 Margot would be a waste. Nobody moved. Ethan stared at this woman, this waitress, this nobody in a stained uniform, and felt the bottom drop out of his stomach. Because he'd built a fortune on reading people, on knowing when someone was bluffing, and every instinct in his body was screaming that she wasn't. Marcus, he said quietly, did you read the FDA preliminary review? Marcus looked like he was going to be sick. The acquisition team handles. Did anyone on the acquisition team read it? Silence. Get them on the phone, Ethan said. Now. I want every piece of documentation on Bionex pulled and verified within the hour. Jennifer, contact our legal team. If this is real, we need to know our options before the ink dries. His executives scattered like startled birds, phones already out, voices rising in panic. Ethan looked back at Clara. She was standing there with the wine bottle, her face carefully blank, like she hadn't just detonated a bomb under $500 million. What's your name? He asked. Clara Bell, sir. Clara Bell. He tasted the name, trying to place it. There was something familiar about it, something nagging at the edge of his memory. And how does a waitress at the Augustine Club know the internal mechanics of a pharmaceutical acquisition that's been classified at the highest levels? For the first time, something flickered across her face. Pain, maybe, or anger buried so deep it had fossilized. I used to do this for a living, she said simply. Used to? Yes, sir. And now you're serving wine. Yes, sir. Ethan studied her. The cheap uniform that didn't quite fit, the exhaustion around her eyes, the way she held herself like someone who'd learned to be invisible. That's quite a fall, he said. Clara's jaw tightened. May I be excused, sir? I have other tables. No, Ethan said. You may not. He pulled out his phone, fingers flying across the screen. 3 texts sent in rapid succession. If this woman was right, if she just spotted a flaw that $20 million worth of analysts had missed, then he needed to know everything about her. Sit down, he said. Sir, I'm working. Sit down. Clara glanced toward the kitchen, toward escape, then slowly lowered herself into the empty chair across from him. She perched on the edge like a bird ready to bolt. Ethan's phone buzzed. His head of security, responding faster than expected. 2 minutes later, another buzz. Then another. He read the messages in silence while Clara sat there, hands folded in her lap, barely breathing. Clara Elizabeth Bell, age 30. Former senior analyst at Holloway Capital Management. Graduated top of her class from NYU, dual degree in economics and molecular biology, recruited straight out of grad school. Rising star. Then nothing. Employment gap of 4 years. Current residence, a studio apartment in Queens. Current employer, the Augustine Club. Current salary, minimum wage plus tips. Something had broken this woman. Something had taken someone brilliant enough to dissect a $500 million deal in 30 seconds and turned her into a waitress who flinched when people raised their voices. Holloway Capital, Ethan said. You worked for Grant Holloway. Clara's face went white. I see, Ethan continued. That explains some things. Grant's good at building people up. He's even better at tearing them down when they become inconvenient. I don't want to talk about Grant Holloway, Clara said, and her voice had gone flat. Dead. I'm not asking what you want. I'm asking what happened. You already know what happened. Clara stood up, her chair scraping against the floor. It's all in the public record, just like the FDA report you didn't read. She turned to leave. Sit down, Ms. Bell, Ethan said, and this time his voice carried the weight of someone who owned buildings, companies, lives. Or you're fired. Clara froze. You don't own this restaurant. No, but I own the man who owns it. Sit down. Slowly, Clara sat. Here's what I think happened, Ethan said, leaning back. I think you were good at your job. Too good, maybe. I think you found something Grant didn't want found, and I think he destroyed you for it. Framed you for insider trading or embezzlement or something equally career-ending. Am I close? Clara's hands had started shaking. She pressed them flat against her thighs. They never proved anything, she whispered, but they didn't have to. The accusation was enough. Nobody in finance will touch me. Nobody will even return my calls. I spent 2 years fighting, trying to clear my name, and all I did was run through my savings and watch my father get sicker while I couldn't afford his treatment. Your father? Stage 4 pancreatic cancer. He's in a Medicaid facility in Brooklyn. I visit him every Thursday after my shift. He doesn't remember who I am anymore, but I go anyway. Ethan felt something twist in his chest. Empathy, maybe. Or recognition. His own father had built the family fortune, then died when Ethan was 23, leaving him an empire and no idea how to be a human being. I'm sorry, he said, and meant it. Clara laughed, but it was a broken sound. No, you're not. People like you don't apologize to people like me. You wanted a story, and you got one. Now I'd like to go back to work before I lose the only job I have left. What if I offered you a different job? Clara's eyes snapped up. What? You just saved me $440 million, Ethan said. Possibly more depending on how bad the liability exposure is. That's worth compensation. I don't want your money. Everyone wants money, Ms. Bell. That's how the world works. Not everyone. Clara stood again, and this time she didn't ask permission. Some of us learned the hard way that money costs more than it's worth. Thank you for the offer, Mr. Cross. I'm sure you'll find someone more appropriate for whatever you have in mind. She walked away, back straight, heading toward the kitchen. Ethan watched her go, his mind already working through angles and possibilities. This woman had identified a fatal flaw in a deal that dozens of professionals had blessed. That kind of talent didn't just disappear. It got buried, hoarded, or stolen. And Grant Holloway had buried it. Ethan knew Grant. They'd circled each other for years in New York's financial ecosystem, never quite allies, never quite enemies, always competitors. Grant was smooth, charming, ruthless when necessary. He built his reputation on finding brilliant young analysts and turning them into weapons, then discarding them when they'd served their purpose. Ethan's phone buzzed again. Marcus, confirming that the FDA report was real. Jennifer, confirming that their legal team was already drafting exit strategies. The Bionex deal was a disaster, exactly like the waitress had said. He should have been furious, should have been tearing into his team for missing something so obvious. Instead, he was curious. Clara Bell had walked away from $500 million of other people's problems without asking for anything in return. That wasn't normal. That wasn't how people operated in his world, which meant either she was a saint, unlikely, or she had her own agenda. Ethan signaled for the check. His team was still scrambling, phones pressed to their ears, voices tight with controlled panic. The celebratory dinner had turned into a crisis management session, Handle it, he told Jennifer. I want a full damage assessment by morning, and find out everything you can about Clara Bell. Everything. The waitress? Jennifer looked confused. The waitress who just embarrassed every single person at this table, Ethan corrected. Yes, her. He left $400 on the table, roughly 10 times the bill, and walked out into the Manhattan night. His driver was waiting, a black Mercedes with tinted windows and enough armor plating to survive a small war. But Ethan didn't get in the car. Instead, he waited. 20 minutes later, the staff entrance opened and Clara emerged, wearing a cheap coat and carrying a backpack that had seen better days. She walked quickly, head down, the same invisible posture she'd had in the restaurant. Ethan followed her. Not closely. He wasn't an idiot. But he tracked her progress through 3 subway transfers, watching the way she kept to herself, the way she avoided eye contact, the way she'd perfected the art of being nobody. She got off at a stop in Queens, walked 4 blocks to a building that looked 1 inspection away from condemnation, and disappeared inside. Ethan stood across the street, looking up at the cracked windows and rusted fire escapes. This was where genius went to die in America. This was what happened when the machine chewed you up and spit you out. His phone rang. Jennifer. Talk to me, Ethan said. It's worse than we thought. The FDA report is just the beginning. Bionex has been cooking their books for 18 months. Their clinical data is fabricated, their patient outcomes are falsified, and their lead researcher is currently under investigation for scientific fraud. We didn't just overpay. We bought a ticking time bomb. Can we get out? Not without losing at least $200 million, maybe more if word gets out before we can restructure. Ethan, this is going to hurt badly. Ethan looked up at Clara's window, 3rd floor, far left, a dim light visible through threadbare curtains. How did she know? He asked quietly. What? Clara Bell. How did she see what $20 million worth of analysts missed? Silence on the other end. Then, I don't know. But I pulled her file. She was incredible, Ethan. 5 years ago, she was managing $300 million in assets and had never lost money on a single position. Then Grant Holloway accused her of front-running trades and feeding information to hedge funds. The SEC investigated for 14 months and found nothing. But by then, her reputation was destroyed. No charges, no conviction, just gone. Grant destroyed her on purpose. Looks like it. Want to know the interesting part? The trades she supposedly front-ran? They were Grant's positions. He made $40 million on them while she took the fall. Ethan felt anger spike through him, cold and sharp. He didn't know Clara Bell, had no particular reason to care about her story beyond professional curiosity, but he knew what it meant to be crushed by someone more powerful, knew what it felt like to have everything taken away. His father had died and left him an empire. Clara's career had died and left her serving wine to men who mocked her for sport. Set up a meeting, Ethan said. I want to talk to her, somewhere private. She already said no to your job offer. Then I'll make a better offer. He hung up and took one last look at the building. Tomorrow he'd go back to his penthouse, his daughter's expensive private school, his world of power and privilege. Tonight, he stood in Queens and watched a light flicker in a window where a woman who'd saved him $500 million probably couldn't afford to heat her apartment. The next morning, Ethan sent flowers. Clara sent them back. He sent a job offer, senior analyst position, $500,000 salary, full benefits. She didn't respond. He sent a personal note, handwritten on his private stationery, asking for just one conversation. The note came back ripped in half. She's not interested, Jennifer said, standing in his office 3 days later. I don't think you're going to crack this one. Ethan stood at his window, looking out over Manhattan. Somewhere in this city, Grant Holloway was pitching his next big fund, building his reputation on the corpses of people like Clara. Find out everything about Grant's current projects, Ethan said. Everything he's working on, everyone he's meeting with, every deal he's chasing. Why? Because I'm going to take them away from him. Jennifer's eyes widened. Ethan, Grant Holloway is what? Untouchable? Powerful? Ethan turned to face her. 4 days ago, I was about to lose $500 million because my team missed something obvious. A waitress spotted it in 30 seconds. That means either my people are incompetent or there's a level of analysis we're not accessing. Or she got lucky. Nobody gets that lucky, Ethan said. Clara Bell is brilliant. Grant Holloway knows she's brilliant. That's why he destroyed her. People like Grant don't eliminate competition unless it's dangerous. So what's your play? Ethan smiled, but it wasn't a kind expression. Grant's working on something. Something big enough that he'd risk destroying one of his own analysts to protect it. I want to know what it is. And when I find out, I'm going to make sure Clara Bell is the one who tears it apart. She won't help you. Not yet, Ethan agreed, but she will. Because 4 years ago, Grant Holloway took everything from her, and I'm going to give her a chance to take it all back. He picked up his phone and made a call. Marcus, I need a full investigation into Grant Holloway's current portfolio. Every investment, every fund, every pitch deck. I want to know what he's building. That's going to take time. Grant's operations are locked down tight. Then take time. I'll wait. But even as he said it, Ethan knew waiting wasn't his strength. He was a man who broke things, who moved through obstacles like they were suggestions. Clara Bell had said no. That just meant he hadn't asked the right question yet. The answer came 2 weeks later, delivered in a manila envelope by his head of intelligence. Grant's launching a new fund, Marcus said, spreading documents across Ethan's desk. Green energy infrastructure. He's pitching it as the next big thing. Renewable technology, government subsidies, ESG compliance. He's already raised $400 million in commitments. Ethan flipped through the prospectus. It was impressive. Glossy presentations, detailed analysis, projections that looked almost too good to be true, which usually meant they were. When's he pitching us? Ethan asked. Next month. He requested a meeting 3 days ago, wants to bring you in as an anchor investor. Ethan smiled. Accept the meeting, and then get Clara Bell on the phone. She won't. Tell her Grant Holloway is about to ask me for money, Ethan interrupted. Tell her I'm considering saying yes. And tell her if she wants to stop him, she has exactly 1 week to convince me otherwise. Marcus hesitated. That's manipulative. That's business, Ethan corrected. Make the call. The call went unanswered, but 3 days later, at 11 p.m. on a Thursday night, Ethan's private cell phone rang. This is Clara Bell, a quiet voice said. I got your message. Ethan set down his whiskey. Ms. Bell, thank you for calling. I'm not doing this for you, she said immediately. I'm doing this because if Grant Holloway is raising money, someone's about to get hurt, and I'm tired of watching him win. Good, Ethan said. Then let's make sure he doesn't. Clara arrived at Ethan's office building at 6 a.m. before the security guards had finished their coffee. She stood on the sidewalk for 10 minutes, staring up at the glass tower, wondering what the hell she was doing. 4 years. 4 years of keeping her head down, of making herself small, of pretending she didn't care that the world had moved on without her. And now she was walking back into it because Ethan Cross had dangled the one thing she couldn't resist, the chance to hurt Grant Holloway. She pushed through the revolving doors. The lobby was all marble and steel, the kind of aggressive wealth that made her studio apartment feel even smaller in her memory. A receptionist looked up, took in Clara's second-hand coat and worn boots, and her smile went professional in that particular way that meant you don't belong here. I have an appointment with Mr. Cross, Clara said. Name, Clara Bell. The receptionist's fingers flew across her keyboard. Her eyebrows rose slightly. Top floor. The executive elevator is to your right. Clara rode up alone, watching the city shrink below her through the glass walls. She'd forgotten what this felt like, the rush of being somewhere that mattered, where decisions worth millions got made before most people finished breakfast. She'd forgotten how much she missed it. The elevator doors opened directly into a reception area that probably cost more than her annual salary. Jennifer Walton was waiting, dressed in a charcoal suit that looked like it had been tailored by someone who understood power. Ms. Bell, Jennifer said, extending a hand. We spoke on the phone. Clara shook it. Jennifer's grip was firm, measuring. This was a woman who'd clawed her way to COO and wasn't about to apologize for it. Ethan's waiting in the conference room, Jennifer continued. Can I get you coffee, water? I'm fine. You sure? You look like you could use... I said I'm fine. Jennifer's smile tightened. This way. The conference room had floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Manhattan. Ethan stood at the far end, talking on his phone, wearing a suit that probably cost more than 3 months of Clara's rent. He looked different than he had at the restaurant, sharper, harder, like he'd put on armor made of money and confidence. He ended the call when Clara entered. Ms. Bell, he said, thank you for coming. You said Grant was pitching you an investment. Good morning to you, too. Clara didn't sit down. I didn't come here for small talk. If you're serious about looking at Grant's fund, I need to see the prospectus. Ethan gestured to the table. A thick document sat there, bound in expensive leather, Grant's company logo embossed in gold. Clara's stomach twisted just looking at it. She picked it up, flipped it open, started reading. Ethan watched her. So did Jennifer, who'd taken a seat near the door like she was guarding the exit. Clara read for 3 minutes without speaking. Then she laughed, a sharp, bitter sound that made both of them flinch. He's really doing this, she muttered. The arrogant bastard is actually doing this. Doing what? Ethan asked. Clara looked up. The same scam he tried to run 5 years ago, the one I caught him planning, the one he destroyed my career to bury. The room went very quiet. Explain, Ethan said. Clara sat down then, still holding the prospectus like it might bite her. Grant doesn't invest in green energy. He invests in the appearance of green energy. He finds dying industrial sites, old factories, contaminated land, places nobody wants, and he repackages them as renewable energy projects. Solar farms, wind installations, whatever sounds good. He gets environmental surveys done by companies he controls, surveys that conveniently ignore the toxic waste and contamination. Then he uses those fake surveys to secure government subsidies and private investment. That's fraud, Jennifer said. That's Grant, Clara corrected. He gets the money up front, builds just enough infrastructure to pass initial inspections, then drags out the development phase while funneling the capital into shell companies he owns. By the time anyone realizes the projects aren't viable, that the land is too contaminated, the costs are too high, the technology doesn't work, he's already extracted most of the value. Investors get stuck with worthless property and millions in cleanup costs. Grant walks away with a fortune. I'm Aussie sharp papers walking. Ethan leaned forward. And you caught him doing this? I caught him planning it. 5 years ago, he was assembling a portfolio of contaminated sites in the Midwest. I ran the environmental data and realized the numbers didn't match. The soil surveys were falsified. The water table analysis was incomplete. He was buying toxic waste dumps and calling them investment opportunities. What did you do? Clara's hands tightened on the prospectus. I went to him, told him what I'd found. I thought he'd kill the project, cut his losses. Instead, he killed my career. He accused me of insider trading, said I was using privileged information to trade against our positions. The SEC investigated. They found nothing because there was nothing to find. But Grant made sure everyone in finance knew I was under investigation. By the time I was cleared, nobody would hire me. Nobody would even talk to me. Why didn't you fight back? Jennifer asked. If you had proof he was running a fraud. I didn't have proof, Clara interrupted. I had suspicions and incomplete data. Grant's smart. He doesn't leave evidence lying around. And even if I could have proven it, who was going to believe a junior analyst over Grant Holloway? He's a legend. He's untouchable. Nobody's untouchable, Ethan said quietly. Clara met his eyes. You don't know Grant like I do. He's been running variations of this scam for 20 years. He's untouchable because he makes powerful people rich. They don't care how he does it as long as the returns look good on paper. Then why did you come here? Ethan asked. If he's so untouchable, why waste your time? Clara was quiet for a long moment. Outside, the city was waking up. Millions of people going about their lives, chasing their own small dreams, completely unaware that in rooms like this, people like Grant Holloway were deciding who won and who lost. Because I'm tired, she said finally. I'm tired of watching him win. I'm tired of pretending it doesn't matter, and I'm tired of being afraid. Ethan nodded slowly. Good. Fear makes people cautious. Cautious people lose. He stood, walked to the windows, looked out over the city he'd conquered by the age of 32. Here's what's going to happen, he said. Grant's pitching me his fund in 3 weeks. He wants me as an anchor investor, $500 million. I'm going to tell him I'm interested, very interested. And while he's busy courting my money, you're going to tear his operation apart from the inside. Clara's heart started beating faster. How? You still have contacts in the industry? Some. Most won't talk to me. They will when they know you're working for me, Ethan said. Jennifer will set you up with office space, credentials, whatever you need. I want a full analysis of Grant's fund. Every property, every survey, every company he's used. If he's running the same scam, the pattern will be there. And if I find it, then we expose him, Ethan said simply. We blow up his fund, destroy his reputation, and make sure he never scams another investor again. Clara felt something unfold in her chest. Hope, maybe? Or just the memory of what hope used to feel like. What do you get out of this? She asked. Ethan turned to face her. Satisfaction, and the knowledge that I didn't hand $500 million to a con artist. That enough for you? It wasn't, Clara knew. Men like Ethan Cross didn't do anything out of pure altruism. He had an angle, something he wasn't saying. But right now, she didn't care. Right now, he was offering her a weapon, and she was going to use it. I'll need access to environmental databases, she said. EPA records, state regulatory filings, geological surveys, and I'll need subpoena power if we're going to get Grant's internal documents. Done, Ethan said. Anything else? Clara hesitated. Why me? You could hire a dozen investigators who aren't damaged goods, people who actually have reputations left to lose. Ethan's expression softened slightly. Because those people don't have something you have. Which is? Motivation, Ethan said. They do this for money. You'll do this because you want to watch him burn, and people who want something badly enough don't quit when it gets hard. He was right, and Clara hated that he was right. I need to visit my father this afternoon, she said. I'll start tomorrow. Your father, Ethan repeated. How is he? Dying, Clara said bluntly. Pancreatic cancer doesn't care if you're a good person. It just kills you slowly while you forget everyone you ever loved. Something flickered across Ethan's face. Pain, recognition, something human underneath the expensive suit. Take whatever time you need, he said quietly. Jennifer will set up your access. We'll talk tomorrow. Clara stood, started to leave, then stopped at the door. Mr. Cross? Ethan, he corrected. Ethan, if I do this, if I find what I think I'm going to find, Grant's not going to just roll over. He'll come after me again. He'll come after anyone I care about. He'll burn everything down rather than lose. I know. And you're still willing to do this? Ethan smiled, and it was a cold, dangerous expression. Ms. Bell, I've been bored for 5 years. Running companies is easy when you're good at it. Making money is easy when you have enough of it. But taking down someone who thinks they're invincible? That's interesting. Clara nodded. She understood that language. Understood the hunger for something real in a world built on abstractions. Then let's make it interesting, she said. The nursing facility in Brooklyn smelled like disinfectant and defeat. Clara signed in at the front desk, forced a smile at the nurse who'd stopped learning residents' names years ago, and walked down the hallway to room 237. Her father sat by the window, staring at nothing. He was 73 but looked 90. Cancer and chemo had eaten him from the inside out, left him a hollowed shell. His hands shook constantly. He didn't turn when Clara entered. Hi, Dad, she said softly, pulling up a chair. It's Thursday. I brought you those cookies you used to like. No response. I got a new job, Clara continued, unpacking the cookies, even though she knew he wouldn't eat them. Working for someone important, making real money again. Maybe we can get you moved to somewhere nicer, somewhere with actual windows that open. Her father's eyes moved slightly. For a moment, Clara thought he recognized her. Then his gaze slid past her, focusing on something that wasn't there. The numbers don't add up, he mumbled. They never add up. Someone's cooking the books. Clara's throat tightened. Her father had been an accountant back when he was still himself. He taught her to read balance sheets when other kids were learning multiplication tables. He'd been the one who encouraged her to study finance, who believed she could be more than just another number. I know, Dad, she whispered. I'm going to fix it. I'm going to make the numbers add up. She stayed for an hour, talking about nothing, filling the silence with words he wouldn't remember. When visiting hours ended, she kissed his forehead. He flinched like she was a stranger, and walked back out into the world. On the subway home, Clara pulled out her phone, started making a list of everything she'd need to take Grant down. Environmental databases, property records, shell company registrations. The work was familiar, comforting. This was what she was good at, finding patterns, connecting dots, seeing the truth hiding in the numbers. Her phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. Office is ready. Security will have your credentials tomorrow. Take the weekend to settle in. We start Monday. Jennifer. Clara stared at the message. This was real. This was actually happening. After 4 years of being invisible, she was about to walk back into the world that had chewed her up and spit her out. And this time, she was going to bite back. Monday morning, Clara arrived at Cross Industries wearing the only professional clothes she still owned, a suit she'd bought 6 years ago that didn't quite fit anymore. Jennifer took one look and handed her a credit card. Company expense account, Jennifer said. Get yourself something appropriate. You're representing Ethan now. It's not a suggestion, Jennifer interrupted. You're about to be dealing with people who judge based on appearances. Look the part, or they won't take you seriously. Clara wanted to argue, but Jennifer was already walking away, heels clicking on marble floors. Clara looked down at the black Amex in her hand. The credit limit was probably more than she made in a year at the restaurant. She bought 2 suits, 3 blouses, and a pair of shoes that didn't have holes in them. The total came to $6,000. She felt sick spending it, but Jennifer was right. Appearances mattered in this world. Nobody listened to people who looked poor. Her office was on the 42nd floor, smaller than Ethan's but with the same view. A desk, a computer, access to databases that required security clearances she'd forgotten she could get. Clara sat down and opened Grant's prospectus. The fund was called Green Future Capital. $400 million in committed investments, targeting renewable energy infrastructure in post-industrial areas. The marketing was brilliant. Photos of solar panels gleaming in sunlight, wind turbines against blue skies, smiling workers in hard hats. It looked legitimate. It looked like exactly the kind of socially responsible investment that institutional money loved. Clara started with a property list. 12 sites across 6 states. Former manufacturing facilities, chemical plants, old industrial parks. Grant claimed each had been assessed and cleared for redevelopment. She pulled the EPA records. The first site, an old steel mill in Pennsylvania, had been cited for groundwater contamination 3 times in the past decade. TCE levels above safe limits. Chromium in the soil. The last assessment recommended full environmental remediation before any construction. Grant's survey said the site was clean. Clara's hands started shaking. She forced herself to breathe, to stay calm. One contaminated site didn't prove a pattern. She needed more. The second site in Ohio, former chemical processing plant. EPA records showed PCB contamination, lead in the soil, asbestos in the remaining structures. Estimated cleanup costs, $40 million. Grant's survey said minor contamination, easily mitigated, suitable for immediate development. Third site. Fourth site. Fifth site. Every single property on Grant's list was a toxic disaster. Every single survey was falsified. He wasn't building renewable energy infrastructure. He was buying the cheapest land he could find, land nobody else wanted because it was poisoned, and pretending it was valuable. Clara felt rage building in her chest, hot and bright. This was worse than 5 years ago. He wasn't just planning the scam. He was actively running it. $400 million from investors who trusted him, all heading toward worthless contaminated land. Her office door opened. Ethan walked in without knocking. "What did you find?" he asked. Clara turned her computer screen toward him, pulled up the EPA reports, the falsified surveys, the comparison analysis she'd been building. "Every property is contaminated," she said. "Every single one. And every survey Grant's using was done by Environmental Assessment Solutions, a company that exists only on paper. I traced the corporate structure. It's owned by a holding company that's owned by another holding company that's ultimately controlled by Grant himself. He's literally paying himself to produce fake environmental clearances." Ethan leaned over her shoulder, reading the data. His jaw tightened. How much would cleanup cost on these properties? Clara pulled up her calculations. Conservative estimate? $600 million? And that's assuming the contamination is as limited as the EPA reports suggest. Could be double that if they dig deeper. So he's selling $400 million in investments backed by properties that are worth negative $200 million. At minimum, Clara confirmed. And that's before accounting for the fact that most of these sites can't legally be developed without full environmental remediation, which requires state and federal approval that he'll never get. How is he getting away with this? Because nobody checks, Clara said. Institutional investors see Grant's track record, they see the glossy presentations, and they assume the due diligence has been done. They don't actually verify the underlying assets. They trust the name. Ethan pulled up a chair, sat down beside her. For a few minutes, they went through the data in silence, Clara pointing out the discrepancies, Ethan asking questions that showed he understood exactly what they were looking at. "This is criminal," he said finally. "Securities fraud, environmental fraud, probably money laundering. We take this to the SEC, Grant goes to prison." "If they believe us," Clara said, "if they investigate, if they can prove intent." That's a lot of ifs. "You don't think they'll act?" Clara turned to face him. "Ethan, Grant Holloway has spent 20 years building relationships with regulators, politicians, and prosecutors. He donates to the right campaigns. He sits on the right boards. When I tried to expose him 5 years ago, the SEC investigated me, not him. You think that was an accident? So what do you suggest?" Clara looked back at her screen, at the evidence that should have been enough to destroy Grant, but probably wasn't. "We need more than proof of fraud," she said. "We need proof that he knew it was fraud. We need documentation showing he intentionally falsified the surveys. We need communication showing he planned to deceive investors. And we need to make it so public, so undeniable, that even his connections can't save him." "How do we get that?" Clara smiled, and it wasn't a nice expression. "We make him think he's winning. We let him pitch you the investment. We act interested. And while he's distracted, we dig into his operation and find the smoking gun." Ethan studied her. "You've thought about this. How to take him down. You've been planning it. For 4 years," Clara admitted, "every night I couldn't sleep. Every shift at the restaurant when some Wall Street guy talked about what a genius Grant Holloway was. I've been running scenarios in my head, figuring out how to hurt him. I just never thought I'd actually get the chance." "Well, now you have it," Ethan said. "So let's not waste it." Over the next 2 weeks, Clara disappeared into the work. She barely slept, barely ate. Jennifer kept bringing her food, which she forgot to touch. Ethan would find her in the office at midnight, surrounded by documents, cross-referencing property records with corporate filings with environmental surveys. She found the shell companies Grant used to hide money, found the offshore accounts where he'd stashed previous scam profits, found the pattern. He'd run smaller versions of this fraud 3 times before, always walking away just before the collapse. "He's getting bolder," Clara told Ethan one evening. They were alone in the conference room, city lights glittering below. "Each scam is bigger than the last. He started with 50 million, then 100, then 200. Now he's going for 400. Eventually, he's going to get caught." "Unless we catch him first," Ethan said. Clara rubbed her eyes. She'd been awake for 36 hours. Her coffee had gone cold hours ago. "I need access to his internal communications," she said. "Email, phone records, anything that shows he knew the surveys were fake. Without that, a good lawyer can claim it was an honest mistake, that he trusted the wrong assessment company. We need proof of intent." "Can you get it?" "Not legally," Claire admitted. "Everything I've found so far is public record, but his internal operations are locked down. He doesn't put anything incriminating in writing." Ethan was quiet for a moment. Then, "What if we had someone on the inside?" "You mean a mole? Good luck. Grant doesn't trust anyone. His core team has been with him for years. They're loyal because he pays them obscene amounts of money to look the other way." "What about his new hires? He must be staffing up for this fund." Clara sat up straighter. "Actually, yeah. He'd need analysts, someone to handle the day-to-day operations. Someone junior enough that he doesn't worry about them asking questions." "Think you could get hired?" "Absolutely not," Clara said. "Grant knows who I am. He destroyed my career specifically to keep me away from his operations." "Then we find someone he doesn't know," Ethan said. "Someone clean. Someone smart enough to understand what they're looking at, but inexperienced enough that Grant won't see them as a threat." Clara thought about it. It was risky. If Grant caught them planting someone, he'd shut down everything. But if it worked, "I might know someone," she said slowly. "A former classmate from NYU, brilliant with data analysis, just graduated with her MBA. She's looking for work in finance." "She trustworthy?" "She's desperate," Clara said. "Her student loans are killing her. She'll do it if the money's right." "Then make the offer," Ethan said. "Whatever it takes." Her name was Maya Torres, and she met Clara at a coffee shop in Greenwich Village, looking equal parts hopeful and terrified. "You're serious?" Maya asked, stirring sugar into coffee she wouldn't drink. "You want me to apply to work for Grant Holloway so I can spy on him?" "I want you to apply to work for a criminal," Clara corrected. "And yes." "Clara, if he finds out—" "He won't. You're nobody to him. Just another ambitious kid fresh out of business school. You apply through normal channels, you interview well, and you keep your mouth shut about knowing me." Maya bit her lip. She looked young, younger than her 26 years. Clara remembered being that age, believing the world was fair, believing hard work mattered more than connections. "What would I have to do?" Maya asked. "Your job, whatever they assign you. But you copy everything. Every email, every document, every conversation you overhear, you send it to an encrypted server, and you don't ask questions about what we do with it." "That's industrial espionage." "That's evidence gathering," Clara said. "Grant's running a fraud that's going to destroy hundreds of investors. We're trying to stop him." "By breaking the law?" Clara leaned forward. "Maya, remember when you called me 2 years ago? When you couldn't find work because your degree was from a state school instead of an Ivy? When you'd been rejected from 40 jobs and couldn't afford to make loan payments? You asked me how I survived it. Remember what I told you?" Maya nodded slowly. "I told you the system is rigged, that people like Grant win because people like us play by rules they ignore. Well, I'm done playing by their rules. Question is whether you are too." Maya stared into her coffee for a long moment. Then, "How much does it pay?" $200,000, Clara said. "Plus a bonus when we take him down." Maya's eyes went wide. Clara, that's more than you'd make in 3 years at a normal job." "I know. Ethan's paying for results. And if I get caught? Then you blame me. Say I recruited you under false pretenses. Ethan's lawyers will protect you." It was a lie, or at least a half-truth. If Maya got caught, there was only so much even Ethan's money could do. But Clara needed her, needed eyes inside Grant's operation, and she was willing to bend the truth to get them. Maya took a shaky breath. "Okay, I'll do it." "You sure?" "No," Maya admitted, "but I'm doing it anyway." They shook hands across the table, two women who'd been chewed up by the same machine, making a deal that would either save them or destroy them. There was no middle ground anymore. Maya got the job in 3 days. Clara watched from her office as the confirmation email came through, copied from Maya's encrypted phone to the secure server they'd set up. "Welcome to Green Future Capital. Your start date is Monday, March 15th. Please arrive at 8 a.m. for orientation." "She's in," Clara said, not looking up from her screen. Ethan was standing by the window, phone pressed to his ear, negotiating something worth more money than Clara would see in a lifetime. He ended the call and walked over. "That was fast." "Grant's hiring anyone with a pulse right now," Clara said. "He needs bodies to process all the documentation for the fund launch. Maya's got the credentials, no red flags, and she interviewed like someone desperate for a chance, which she is. When does she start feeding us information? As soon as she has access to their systems. Could be day 1, could be a week. Depends on how much trust Grant gives new hires." Ethan pulled up a chair. He did that now, Clara noticed. Sat beside her instead of across from her, like they were collaborators instead of employer and employee. "You worried about her?" he asked. "Terrified," Clara admitted. "Maya's good with numbers, but she's not a spy. If she slips up, if Grant notices anything off, he'll bury her the same way he buried me. Then we make sure she doesn't slip up." Clara finally looked at him. "You say that like it's simple. Like we control what happens. We don't. Grant's been doing this for 20 years. He's paranoid, methodical, and he destroys anyone who gets too close. We're sending a 26-year-old kid into his operation and hoping she doesn't get caught. You have a better idea?" She didn't. That was the problem. They needed inside access, and Maya was the only option they had. Clara's phone buzzed. A text from Maya. "First day tomorrow. I'm freaking out." Clara typed back. "Don't. You're just another analyst. Do your job, keep your head down, and document everything. You've got this." The response came immediately. "What if he recognizes me from somewhere? What if he knows we're connected?" "He doesn't. You're nobody to him. That's your advantage." There was a long pause. Then, "Okay, I trust you." Clara set down her phone and realized her hands were shaking. She hadn't trusted anyone in 4 years, hadn't let anyone get close enough to matter, and now Maya's safety was in her hands, and if something went wrong, "She'll be fine," Ethan said quietly. "You don't know that." "No, but worrying won't change anything. So we prepare for every scenario we can think of, and we move forward anyway." Clara hated that he was right, hated that his calm certainty made her feel steadier. She wasn't supposed to rely on anyone, especially not a billionaire who probably saw this whole thing as an expensive game, but she was running out of options for pushing him away. Maya's first week at Green Future Capital produced 16 gigabytes of documents: property assessments, investor presentations, email chains, financial projections. She copied everything to the encrypted server every night, then went home to her tiny apartment and threw up from stress. Clara read it all. The operation was more sophisticated than she'd expected. Grant had 3 shell companies processing the environmental surveys, 2 more handling the property acquisitions, and a web of offshore accounts moving money between them. On paper, everything looked legitimate. The surveys appeared to come from independent firms. The property purchases seemed to be arm's-length transactions. The money flows followed legal patterns. But Clara knew what to look for, knew how Grant thought. She traced the corporate structures back through layers of holding companies and discovered they all terminated at the same Cayman Islands entity, an entity controlled by Grant's personal trust. He owned every company in the chain, was essentially paying himself to validate his own fraud, and disguising it behind enough legal complexity that casual observers would never notice. "This is good," Jennifer said, reviewing Clara's analysis in the war room they'd set up. The entire West conference room was now covered in printouts, diagrams, flowcharts mapping Grant's operation. But it's still not enough for criminal charges. A good lawyer could argue he didn't know about the connections, that he hired these companies in good faith. "Which is why we need communication showing intent," Clara said. She'd been living on coffee and 3 hours of sleep for 2 weeks. Her suit hung looser than it had when she bought it. "Maya, what do you have access to?" Maya sat at the far end of the table, looking exhausted. She'd aged since taking the job, dark circles under her eyes, nervous habits she didn't have before. "I can see most operational emails," Maya said, "but Grant's personal communications are locked down. He uses a separate system, encrypted, doesn't run through company servers. Only his core team has access." "Who's his core team?" "David Chen, his CFO, Rachel Morrison, head of investor relations, and his executive assistant, a woman named Catherine Price. They're the only ones who see everything." Clara wrote down the names. "Can you get close to any of them?" "Catherine, maybe. She's training me on the document management system. She's friendly, or at least not hostile." "Build that relationship," Clara said. "We need to know what Grant's saying when he thinks nobody's listening." Maya nodded, but she looked miserable. Clara felt a stab of guilt. This kid was risking her entire career, possibly her freedom. And for what? So Clara could get revenge on someone who'd forgotten she existed? After the meeting, Ethan pulled Clara aside. "She's burning out," he said. "I know. So pull her out. We have enough documentation to kill the fund without inside access." Clara shook her head. "We have enough to expose the fraud. We don't have enough to destroy him. There's a difference." "Is there?" Ethan's voice was sharp. "Or are you just moving the goalpost because you want him to suffer?" Clara felt anger flash through her. "You don't get to judge me for this. You're the one who offered me the chance." "I offered you a chance to stop his fraud," Ethan interrupted. "Not to destroy yourself chasing something that might not exist. If we push too hard, we lose everything. Maya gets caught, Grant lawyers up, and we end up with nothing." "Then what do you suggest?" Ethan was quiet for a moment. "I suggest we use what we have. I'm meeting with Grant tomorrow. His pitch for the fund. I'll act interested, ask detailed questions, see if he slips up. Meanwhile, you finish documenting the fraud. We take everything to the SEC and the FBI simultaneously, make it too big to ignore." "And Grant walks away with a fine and no prison time," Clara said bitterly. "Rich people don't go to jail, Ethan. They pay penalties and move on." "Some do. Not Grant. He's too connected, too careful. We need ironclad proof of criminal intent or he slides out of this." Ethan studied her. "This isn't about justice anymore, is it? This is personal." "It was always personal," Clara said. "You knew that when you hired me." "I hired you to be smart, not reckless." "Then maybe you hired the wrong person." She walked out before he could respond, her heart pounding. Part of her knew he was right, knew she was risking too much, pushing too hard. But the other part, the part that had spent 4 years serving wine to men who looked through her like she was furniture, that part wanted blood. Grant Holloway arrived at Cross Industries the next morning in a car that cost more than Clara's father's medical bills. Clara watched from her office as he stepped out, 62 years old but looking 50. Silver hair perfectly styled, suit that probably required a tailor to measure him personally. He moved like a man who'd never been told no. She felt her stomach twist with something that might have been fear or rage or both. Jennifer escorted Grant to the executive conference room. Ethan was already there, perfectly composed, giving away nothing. Clara watched on the monitor they'd set up, cameras hidden in the light fixtures, recording everything. "Grant," Ethan said, shaking hands. "Good to see you." "Ethan, thank you for making time. I know your schedule's impossible." "For the right opportunity, I make time." Ethan gestured to the chairs. "Tell me about Green Future." Grant opened his presentation with the confidence of someone who'd done this 1,000 times. Slides filled with green energy rhetoric, charts showing projected returns, photos of the properties looking pristine and full of potential. Clara had seen this presentation, had spent 2 weeks tearing it apart, finding every lie, every manipulation. Watching Grant sell it with absolute conviction made her want to put her fist through the screen. "We're targeting post-industrial sites," Grant said, his voice smooth and persuasive. "Areas that have been economically depressed for decades. We're not just building renewable energy infrastructure. We're revitalizing communities, creating jobs, generating sustainable returns." "The social impact angle," Ethan said, "that's compelling for institutional investors." "Exactly. ESG mandates mean money's flooding into green investments. But most of it's going to established markets, solar farms in Nevada, wind in Texas. We're finding value where others aren't looking. Because the properties are contaminated," Ethan said. Grant didn't even flinch. "Because they require remediation, which we've factored into our models. The environmental work is manageable, and once complete, these sites have tremendous upside." Clara listened to him lie with such casual ease and felt sick. He actually believed his own bullshit, or he told it so many times the difference didn't matter anymore. "I'd like to see the environmental assessments," Ethan said. "Full surveys, not just summaries." "Of course. Catherine can send those over this afternoon. And I'd like my team to conduct independent verification, third-party surveys." For the first time, Grant hesitated, just for a second, but Clara caught it. "That's unusual," Grant said carefully. "The surveys we have are from certified firms, fully compliant with EPA standards." "I'm sure they are," Ethan interrupted. "But when I'm considering a $500 million investment, I verify everything personally. You understand." Grant's smile tightened. "Absolutely. Though I should mention we're closing the funding round in 6 weeks. If you need extensive due diligence, the timeline might be tight." "6 weeks is plenty of time," Ethan said, "assuming the properties are as clean as you say they are." The meeting continued for another hour. Grant pitched, Ethan asked pointed questions, and Clara watched the dance between two predators trying to figure out who was hunting whom. When it ended, Grant left looking confident. Ethan waited until the elevator doors closed, then picked up his phone. "He's lying," Ethan said when Clara answered. "Did you catch the hesitation when I asked for independent surveys?" "I caught it," Clara said. "He can't let you verify the properties because the moment someone competent looks at them, the fraud falls apart. So he'll try to close the funding before we can complete due diligence, rush us into a decision, or withdraw your opportunity entirely, tell you the fund's oversubscribed and he doesn't need your money." Ethan was quiet for a moment. "We need to move faster. If Grant gets spooked, he'll shut down the whole operation and disappear the evidence." "Maya's working on it," Clara said. She got closer to Catherine, the executive assistant. They've been having lunch together. Catherine's lonely, likes having someone to talk to. Maya thinks she might open up. "How long?" "I don't know. Could be days, could be weeks. Building trust takes time." "We don't have weeks," Ethan said. "Grant's going to push for a decision. I'll stall as long as I can, but eventually he'll walk away." Clara knew he was right. They were running out of time, and every day Grant operated was another day he could be hiding evidence, moving money, preparing to vanish if things got hot. She needed something to break. Needed Maya to find the smoking gun, or for Grant to make a mistake, or for anything to shift in their favor. Instead, things got worse. Maya called at 2 in the morning, her voice shaking so badly Clara could barely understand her. He knows, Maya said. Grant knows something's wrong. Clara sat up, suddenly wide awake. What happened? Catherine asked me about my background today. Where I went to school, who I knew, whether I had any connections to other firms. She was casual about it, but it didn't feel casual. It felt like someone told her to check on me. What did you say? The truth. NYU, no connections, desperate for work. But Clara, she kept pushing. Asked if I knew anyone at Cross Industries. I said no, but I don't think she believed me. Clara's mind raced. If Grant was investigating Maya, that meant he suspected something. Maybe not the full scope, but enough to be cautious. Pull out, Clara said. Don't go to work tomorrow. Say you're sick. Buy us time to figure out what he knows. I can't just disappear. That'll confirm his suspicions. Better than getting caught. Clara, I'm close. Catherine told me she's working on something big for Grant, something he's keeping separate from the main fund. If I can find out what it is, it's not worth the risk. It's what you hired me for, Maya said, and her voice had an edge now, an anger. You asked me to do this. You said it mattered, so let me finish. Clara wanted to say no, wanted to pull Maya out, keep her safe, prevent her from becoming another casualty in this war. But Maya was right. They'd asked her to risk everything, and she'd agreed. Pulling her now would waste all of it. Be careful, Clara said finally. If anything feels wrong, you walk away. Forget the evidence, forget the job, just leave. I will. But Clara didn't believe her. People didn't walk away when they were this close. They pushed harder, took bigger risks, convinced themselves they could handle it. Clara knew because she'd done exactly the same thing 5 years ago. She called Ethan. Grant's investigating Maya, she said when he answered, sounding wide awake despite the hour. We might be compromised. Might be, or are. I don't know. Could be routine background checking. Could be he smells something wrong. She heard Ethan moving around on the other end. I'm coming to the office. Meet me there in 30 minutes. They spent the rest of the night in the war room, going through everything Maya had sent, looking for anything that might have tipped Grant off. A pattern in her questions, an unusual data request, some small detail that didn't fit. Clara couldn't find it. Maybe he's just paranoid, Jennifer suggested. She'd joined them around 4 a.m., looking exhausted. Grant didn't survive this long by being trusting. He probably vets everyone. Or someone told him to look at her specifically, Clara said, which means we have a leak. We don't have a leak, Ethan said firmly. Only 5 people know about Maya. Everyone in this room, plus Maya herself. Unless you think one of us is feeding information to Grant. Clara looked around the table. Jennifer, who'd been Ethan's right hand for 6 years. Marcus, who'd been with the company since the beginning. Ethan himself, who had more money than Grant and no reason to protect him. No one here was the leak, which meant either Grant was paranoid or they'd missed something. Maya showed up to work the next morning, and Catherine was waiting at her desk. Mr. Holloway wants to see you, Catherine said, and her voice was different, professional, distant. Maya's pulse spiked. Did I do something wrong? He didn't say, just asked me to bring you up. Grant's office was on the top floor, all glass and steel, a view of Manhattan that probably cost $50 million. He sat behind a desk that looked carved from a single piece of mahogany, reading something on his computer. Ms. Torres, he said without looking up. Sit down. Maya sat. Her hands were shaking. She clasped them in her lap, tried to look calm. Grant finally looked at her. He had pale blue eyes, the kind that didn't show emotion, the kind that made you feel like you were being cataloged and assessed. You've been with us 2 weeks, he said. Yes, sir. Catherine tells me you're doing good work. Quick learner, detail-oriented, no complaints. Thank you, sir. She also tells me you've been asking a lot of questions about my previous funds, about company structure, about how we handled due diligence. Maya's mouth went dry. I'm trying to understand the business. I thought that was... It's normal, Grant interrupted. Ambitious young analysts always ask questions. That's how you learn. But there's a difference between curiosity and investigation. Do you understand the distinction? I think so. Good. Grant leaned back in his chair. Because I've built this company by being very careful about who I trust. And when someone new starts showing unusual interest in the details of my operations, I pay attention. Maya felt like she couldn't breathe. Sir, I'm I'm not accusing you of anything, Grant said smoothly. I'm simply making my expectations clear. You were hired to process documentation and support the investment team. That's the scope of your role. Questions outside that scope make me wonder if you're working for someone else. I'm not. I hope that's true. Grant pulled up something on his computer, turned the screen toward her. It showed Maya's employment history, her academic record, even her social media profiles. Because if I find out you're feeding information to a competitor, or to regulators, or to anyone who might interfere with my business, the consequences will be severe. Do we understand each other? Maya nodded, not trusting her voice. Excellent. Grant's smile didn't reach his eyes. You can go. Catherine will reassign you to less sensitive projects. I'm sure you understand. Maya stood on shaking legs and walked out. She made it to the bathroom before she started crying. Clara got the message 20 minutes later. He knows. I'm pulled from anything important. I'm sorry. Clara stared at the text, feeling their entire operation crumbling. Without Maya's access, they had no way to get Grant's internal communications, no way to prove intent, just a pile of circumstantial evidence that a good lawyer would tear apart. She forwarded the message to Ethan. His response was immediate. My office. Now. When she arrived, he was pacing. Jennifer was already there, looking grim. We're out of time, Ethan said. Grant spooked. He's going to shut everything down, move the money, disappear the evidence. We need to move now. With what? Clara demanded. We have property records and shell companies. That's not enough. It's what we have, Ethan interrupted. So we use it. I'm calling the SEC, the FBI, and every financial journalist I know. We make this public before Grant can cover his tracks. He'll sue us for defamation, bury us in legal fees. Let him try, Ethan said. I have better lawyers. Clara wanted to argue, wanted to push for more time, more evidence, the perfect case that would destroy Grant completely. But she could see the truth in Ethan's eyes. They were out of time, out of options, and if they didn't move now, they'd lose everything. Okay, she said quietly. Do it. Ethan made the calls. Within 6 hours, federal investigators were requesting documentation. Within 12 hours, the Wall Street Journal was running a story about questionable practices at Green Future Capital. Within 24 hours, Grant's investors were demanding answers. Clara watched it unfold from her office, feeling numb. This wasn't the victory she'd imagined. It was messy, incomplete, uncertain. Grant would probably survive, probably find a way to spin this, to emerge damaged but not destroyed. But at least she'd tried. At least she'd fought back. Her phone rang. Unknown number. Ms. Bell, a familiar voice said when she answered. This is Grant Holloway. Clara's blood went cold. How did you get this number? I have resources. His voice was calm, almost pleasant. I wanted to congratulate you on your little investigation. Very thorough. You always were talented. I don't have anything to say to you. Of course you do. You've been waiting 4 years to say it, so here's your chance. Tell me how much you hate me, how I ruined your life. Get it off your chest. Clara's hand tightened on the phone. You're not worth my hate, aren't I? Grant laughed softly. Clara, I've been playing this game since before you were born. Did you really think you could hurt me? The SEC will investigate and find nothing. The FBI will waste 6 months and close the case. My investors will complain and then move on, and you'll go back to being nobody. We have proof, Clara said. We have your shell companies, your falsified surveys. You have paperwork, Grant interrupted. Paperwork that my lawyers will explain away. Paperwork that proves nothing except that I made some aggressive investments that didn't work out. There's no crime in being wrong, Ms. Bell. There's a crime in fraud. Then prove it, Grant said. Prove I knew the surveys were fake. Prove I intentionally deceived investors. You can't, because I was very careful to never put that in writing. So enjoy your moment, Clara. Enjoy feeling like you won. Because tomorrow, I'll still be here. And you'll still be exactly where you've always been. He hung up. Clara sat in silence, staring at her phone. He was right. They hadn't proven intent, hadn't found the smoking gun. All they'd done was make noise, and noise wasn't enough. Unless Maya had found something. Clara pulled up the encrypted server, scrolling through the last batch of files Maya had uploaded before being reassigned. Property assessments, investor lists, financial projections. Nothing new. Nothing useful. Then she saw it. A file uploaded 6 hours ago, after Maya had been pulled from sensitive projects. A single document labeled KP_personal_notes.pdf. Clara opened it. It was Catherine's personal planning document, a detailed breakdown of Grant's schedule, his priorities, his upcoming meetings, and buried in the middle, a single line that made Clara's heart stop. Prepare final transfer docs for Cayman accounts. GH wants everything moved before SEC inquiry. Grant was moving money, moving evidence, and Catherine had documented it. Clara grabbed her phone, called Ethan. "We have it," she said when he answered. "We have proof he's destroying evidence." Catherine documented the account transfers. "When?" "They're happening now, today. If we can get the FBI to freeze the accounts before the transfer's complete, I'll call them," Ethan said. "Send me everything." Clara sent the files and then called Maya. "I need you to get Catherine's complete files," Clara said. "Everything she has on the account transfers. We need timestamps, transaction records, anything that proves Grant ordered it." "Clara, I can't. I'm locked out of—" "Catherine trusts you," Clara interrupted. "Use that. Tell her you need help with something. Get access to her computer. Copy the files. This is our last chance." Maya was quiet for a long moment. Then, "Okay, I'll try." "Don't try. Do it. We're out of time." Maya hung up, and Clara waited. An hour passed. Then 2. Finally, her phone buzzed. New files on the encrypted server. Clara opened them and felt something like hope bloom in her chest. Catherine had kept meticulous records. Every conversation with Grant about the accounts. Every instruction to transfer money. Every step of the evidence destruction documented in careful detail by an assistant who probably thought she was just doing her job. It was enough. It was finally enough. Clara sent everything to Ethan, to the FBI, to the journalists already writing stories. She sent it to everyone who could make sure Grant Holloway couldn't bury this. Then she sat back and waited for the world to explode. The explosion came at 6 a.m. Clara was still at the office, hadn't left since Maya's files came through. She'd been running on coffee and adrenaline for 36 hours straight, cross-referencing Catherine's records with the financial data they already had, building an ironclad timeline of Grant's fraud. Her phone lit up with news alerts. Then Ethan's phone. Then Jennifer's. Federal agents raid Green Future Capital offices. Grant Holloway, under investigation for securities fraud. Billionaire investor, accused of environmental fraud scheme. Clara pulled up the live news feeds. Helicopters circling Grant's Midtown office building. FBI agents carrying boxes of documents. Grant himself being escorted out in handcuffs, his face carefully blank, surrounded by lawyers. She watched it happen and felt nothing. No triumph, no satisfaction. Just a hollowness where 4 years of rage had been. "We did it," Jennifer said, standing beside her. "We actually did it." "Maybe," Clara said. "Or maybe this is just the beginning." Ethan was on the phone with someone at the FBI, his voice clipped and professional. When he hung up, he looked tired. "They're charging him with securities fraud, wire fraud, and obstruction of justice," Ethan said. "The evidence Catherine provided shows clear intent to deceive investors and destroy evidence. The prosecutor thinks they have enough for conviction." "Thinks," Claire repeated, "not knows. Nothing's certain until a jury decides. But it's strong. The transfers alone are damning. He moved $80 million while under investigation. That's consciousness of guilt." Clara turned away from the screens. Grant in handcuffs should have felt like victory, but all she could think about was Maya, who'd risked everything to get Catherine's files. Maya, who was probably being questioned by federal agents right now, terrified and alone. "I need to check on Maya," Clara said. "Already done," Jennifer said. "I sent our lawyers to meet her. She's fine, shaken, but fine. The FBI views her as a cooperating witness, not a target." "And Catherine?" "Also cooperating. Turns out she'd been documenting Grant's activities for years. Insurance policy in case he ever turned on her. She's getting immunity in exchange for testimony." Clara absorbed this. Catherine had been sitting on evidence the whole time, just waiting for someone to give her a reason to use it. If they'd known that earlier, if they'd approached her directly instead of going through Maya, but second-guessing didn't change anything. They'd won. Messily, imperfectly, but they'd won. "I need to make a call," Clara said. She walked to her office, closed the door, and dialed the nursing facility in Brooklyn. "This is Clara Bell," she said when someone answered. "I'm calling about my father, Thomas Bell, room 237. I need to speak with his care coordinator." 10 minutes of hold music later, a tired-sounding woman came on the line. "Ms. Bell, your father's condition hasn't changed. We sent you the updated care plan last week." "I want to transfer him," Clara interrupted, "to a private facility, the best one in New York. Cost isn't an issue." Silence on the other end. Then, "Ms. Bell, facilities like that have waiting lists and the costs are considerable. Your father's current care is adequate." "I didn't ask if it was adequate. I asked how to transfer him. Can you help me or do I need to find someone who can?" The woman's tone shifted. "Of course, I'll send you information on the top facilities, but I should mention your father's prognosis hasn't improved. Moving him won't change the outcome." "I know," Clara said quietly, "but he deserves better than a room that smells like bleach and nurses who don't remember his name. Get me the information." She hung up and sat in silence, staring at the news feed still playing on her computer. Grant being loaded into an FBI vehicle. His lawyers shouting "no comment" at reporters. The empire he'd built crumbling in real time. Her phone rang. Unknown number again. Clara almost didn't answer. Then curiosity got the better of her. "Ms. Bell," a woman's voice said, professional, controlled. "This is Rachel Morrison. I work for Grant Holloway." "Worked," Clara corrected. Past tense. "Fair enough." Rachel sounded tired. "I'm calling because Grant asked me to deliver a message. I'm not interested in anything he has to say. Just listen, please." Clara should have hung up, should have blocked the number and moved on. Instead, she waited. "Grant knows he's going to prison," Rachel said. "His lawyers are already negotiating a plea. But he wanted you to know something. He said you were the best analyst he ever hired. Said you had more talent than anyone he'd ever worked with. And he's sorry he destroyed you." Clara laughed, sharp and bitter. "He's sorry? That's the message? He's sorry?" "I'm just repeating what he said. Tell him his apology is worth exactly as much as his environmental surveys. Nothing." Rachel was quiet for a moment. "For what it's worth, I believe him. I think he does regret what he did to you. Not enough to have stopped, but enough to feel bad about it." "That's not worth anything," Claire said. "Regret without change is just self-pity. He had 4 years to make this right. He chose not to." "I know," Rachel sighed. "I just wanted you to hear it. He asked me to tell you, so I did. What you do with it is your business." She hung up. Clara sat there processing. Grant Holloway was sorry. The man who'd destroyed her career, who'd stolen 4 years of her life, who'd made her invisible. He regretted it, and it didn't matter, didn't change anything. His regret wouldn't give her back those years, wouldn't erase the nights she'd cried herself to sleep in that studio apartment, wouldn't bring back her father's memories. Some things couldn't be fixed with apologies. The meeting with Grant happened 3 weeks later, in a conference room at Cross Industries. The FBI had frozen his assets, but his lawyers had negotiated limited access for the purpose of unwinding his investments. Ethan had purchased several of Grant's failing portfolios at cents on the dollar, and now they needed Grant's cooperation to transfer the properties properly. Clara almost didn't go. Ethan had offered to handle it without her, but she wanted to see him, wanted to look him in the eye one more time, now that the power dynamic had shifted. Grant arrived in a suit that looked slept in, flanked by 2 lawyers who looked like they'd rather be anywhere else. He'd aged a decade in 3 weeks, his face gaunt, his silver hair not quite as perfect. Prison was waiting for him. 15 to 20 years, the prosecutors were saying. He'd be 80 when he got out, if he lived that long. He saw Clara and stopped. "Miss Bell," he said, "I wasn't expecting you to be here." "I work here," Clara said evenly. "Senior strategist. Did you miss that in your research?" Something flickered across Grant's face. Pain, maybe, or just the recognition of how completely he'd lost. "Congratulations," he said, and it sounded genuine. "Ethan's lucky to have you." "Sit down, Grant," Ethan said from the head of the table. "We have a lot to cover." The meeting was brutally professional. Ethan went through the properties one by one, the contaminated sites Grant had tried to sell as green energy opportunities, and detailed the actual cleanup costs. Grant sat in silence, signing transfer documents, watching his empire get dismantled piece by piece. Clara had prepared the analysis, had documented every lie, every falsified survey, every dollar that would never be recovered. She presented it clinically, without emotion, the same way she would have presented any business case. Grant listened without interrupting. When she finished, he nodded slowly. "You were right," he said. 5 years ago, when you came to me with concerns about the Midwest properties. You were right, and I buried you for it. That was a mistake." "No," Clara said. "That was a choice. Mistakes are accidents. You chose to destroy me rather than admit you were wrong." "I did," Grant agreed, "and I've been making that same choice for 20 years, destroying anyone who threatened to expose what I was doing. Do you want to know how many people like you there were? How many brilliant analysts I threw away because they saw too much?" "Not particularly." 14, Grant said anyway. 14 people whose careers I ruined to protect my reputation. You were just the last one, the one who finally fought back." Clara felt something twist in her chest. 14 people. 14 lives destroyed, and Grant remembered the exact number. Had been counting, keeping score of his own cruelty. "Why are you telling me this?" she asked. Because you deserve to know you weren't special," Grant said. "You weren't uniquely talented or uniquely threatening. You were just another obstacle I decided to remove. And I want you to understand that when you go home tonight and think you won some great victory, remember that there are 13 other people who didn't. 13 other people who stayed buried." He stood up, gathering his papers. His lawyers moved to follow. "We're done here," Grant said to Ethan. "Your people have everything they need. The transfers will be complete by end of week." "Sit down," Clara said. Grant paused. "Excuse me?" "I said sit down. We're not done." Grant looked at his lawyers, who looked at Ethan, who just leaned back and waited. Slowly, Grant sat. Clara pulled out a folder she'd been carrying, set it on the table, and slid it toward him. "Those are the names of the 13 other analysts you destroyed," she said. "I tracked them down, contacted everyone I could find. 7 of them are working minimum wage jobs like I was. 3 left finance entirely. 2 are still fighting to clear their names. 1 killed himself 4 years ago. His wife said to tell you it's your fault." Grant's face went white. "Here's what's going to happen," Clara continued, her voice steady. "You're going to write a letter to every single one of those people. You're going to admit what you did. You're going to clear their names publicly. And you're going to set up a fund, $10 million, to compensate them for the careers you destroyed." "I don't have 10 million. What? Your wife does," Clara interrupted. "She's not liable for your criminal activity. Her assets are protected. So you're going to convince her to fund this, or I'm going to make sure every news outlet in America knows that you're willing to let innocent people suffer while your family lives in comfort." Grant stared at her. "You can't make me do this." "You're right," Clara said. "I can't. But I can make your life a lot worse than it's already going to be. I can make sure that when you're sitting in a cell for the next 15 years, you're doing it with the knowledge that everyone you destroyed is still suffering. Or you can do this one decent thing and maybe sleep better at night. You want me to have a conscience now?" Grant's voice had an edge. "After everything? I want you to understand that actions have consequences," Clara said. "You spent 20 years thinking you were untouchable. Now you get to spend the next 20 learning you're not." The room was silent. Ethan watched with barely concealed interest. Jennifer had stopped taking notes. Even Grant's lawyers looked uncomfortable. Finally, Grant nodded. "I'll do it. The letters, the fund, all of it. You have my word." "Your word means nothing," Clara said. "But I'll accept your signature on a legal document. Jennifer will draft it. You'll sign it before you leave this building." Grant's jaw tightened, but he nodded again. The rest of the meeting passed in a blur. Documents signed, transfers authorized, loose ends tied up. When Grant finally left, flanked by his lawyers and his failure, Clara felt the tension drain out of her body all at once. She'd done it. Not just exposed him, not just destroyed his operation, but made sure the people he'd hurt would get something back. It wasn't enough. Could never be enough. But it was something. "That was impressive," Ethan said when they were alone. "And slightly terrifying. He deserved worse." Probably. But what you did was better than worse. You made him face what he'd done, made him help the people he hurt. That's more meaningful than just watching him go to prison. Clara wasn't sure she agreed, but she was too tired to argue. I need to go see my father, she said. Take tomorrow off. Take the whole week if you need it. I don't need time off. I need to finish the portfolio analysis for the properties we acquired. Ethan studied her. Clara, you just took down one of the most powerful men in finance. You're allowed to breathe for a minute. I'll breathe when the work is done. She left before he could argue, gathering her things and heading for the elevator. Her phone buzzed as she stepped inside. A text from Maya. Thank you for everything. I got a job offer from a real firm. No more spying required. Clara smiled despite her exhaustion. At least Maya had gotten something good out of this disaster. The nursing facility in Brooklyn looked different now that Clara knew she wouldn't be bringing her father back. She'd found a place in Westchester, expensive, exclusive, with actual gardens and staff who were paid enough to care. Her father would move there next week, and he wouldn't know the difference, but Clara would. She found him in his usual spot by the window, staring at nothing. Hi, Dad, she said, sitting down beside him. I have good news. We're moving you somewhere better, somewhere with actual windows and decent food. Mom would have liked it. Her father didn't respond. Hadn't responded to her mother's name in 2 years. I did something important, Clara continued. Took down a bad guy. Made things right for people he hurt. I think you would have been proud. Still nothing. Clara took his hand, held it gently. His skin was paper thin, his bones fragile. The cancer was winning, slowly eating away at what was left of the man who'd taught her to see patterns in numbers. I wish you could tell me what to do now, she whispered. I got my revenge. I destroyed the man who destroyed me. And it doesn't feel like I thought it would. It just feels empty. Her father's fingers twitched slightly. Clara looked up, hopeful, but his eyes were still distant. She stayed until visiting hours ended, talking about nothing, filling the silence. When she finally left, the sun was setting over Brooklyn, painting the sky in shades of orange and red. Clara stood on the sidewalk, looking back at the facility that had been her Thursday night ritual for 4 years. Soon her father would be somewhere better. Soon Grant would be in prison. Soon the world would move on, the way it always did. And Clara would have to figure out who she was when she wasn't fighting anymore. The news broke 2 days later. Grant's confession, published in the Wall Street Journal, a full-page letter admitting to decades of fraud, naming the analysts he'd destroyed, taking responsibility for the damage he'd caused. The fund for victims was established the same day. $10 million, managed by an independent trustee, to be distributed among the 14 people Grant had ruined. Clara's share came to $700,000. She donated it to cancer research. The other victims weren't so generous. Most took the money and ran, using it to rebuild the lives Grant had shattered. Clara didn't blame them. They'd earned it. The 13th victim, the one who'd killed himself, his widow, got $2 million. Clara made sure of that. Made sure Grant's lawyers understood that if they tried to shortchange her, the deal was off. Phone calls started coming in. Other analysts who'd been destroyed by powerful people asking if Clara could help them. Whistleblowers who needed protection. People who'd been made invisible and wanted someone to see them again. Clara took some of the cases. Turned down others. She wasn't a crusader, wasn't trying to save the world. But she understood what it felt like to be erased, and sometimes that understanding was enough. Ethan offered her a partnership, equal stake in cross industries, full decision-making authority, salary that made her dizzy to think about. She almost said no. Why? Ethan asked when she hesitated. They were in his office, late evening, the city sparkling below them. Because I'm not sure I belong here, Clara said honestly. 6 weeks ago I was serving wine. Now I'm supposed to be running a billion-dollar company? That doesn't make sense. Why not? Because people don't change that fast. Because I'm still the same person who spent 4 years hiding. Because what if I'm not actually good enough and I've just been lucky? Ethan smiled. You think luck spotted the flaws in the BioNext deal? Luck tracked down Grant's shell companies? Luck convinced Maya to risk everything and Catherine to turn on her boss? Maybe. It wasn't luck, Ethan said firmly. It was talent, determination, and the willingness to do what needed to be done. That's not luck. That's who you are. Clara looked out at the city. Somewhere down there, Grant Holloway was preparing for prison. Maya was starting her new job. Catherine was rebuilding her life. 13 other analysts were getting second chances, and Clara was standing in a billionaire's office, being offered everything she'd lost and more. "Okay," she said quietly. "I'll take the partnership, but I have conditions." "Name them." "I want a fund, separate from the main business. For cases like this, people who've been destroyed by fraud, corruption, power imbalances. I want resources to help them fight back." Ethan considered this. "How much are we talking?" $50 million to start, more if we need it." "That's a lot of money for charity." "It's not charity," Clara corrected. "It's investment in people who've been overlooked, underestimated, thrown away. People like I was. You'd be surprised what they can do when someone gives them a chance." Ethan was quiet for a long moment. Then he extended his hand. "Deal," he said. "Welcome to Cross Industries, partner." Clara shook his hand, and for the first time in 4 years, she felt like she was exactly where she was supposed to be. The restaurant was quieter on a Tuesday night. Clara walked through the front door of the Augustine Club for the first time since she'd quit, wearing one of the suits she'd bought with Ethan's credit card. The host recognized her immediately. His eyes widened. "Ms. Bell," he stammered. "I didn't know you were dining with us tonight. Let me get you a table." "I'm not here for dinner," Clara said. "I'm here to see Marcus." Marcus was the new waiter who'd started a month before Clara left. Young, nervous, trying too hard to please the wealthy customers who barely noticed him. The host looked confused, but led her to the back section where Marcus was setting up tables. "Marcus?" Clara said. He jumped, nearly dropping a wine glass. "Ms. Bell, I heard you, that you were working somewhere else now. I didn't expect—" "I wanted to talk to you," Clara said, "about the customers, the ones who treat you like you're invisible." Marcus's face flushed. "I don't know what you mean." "Yes, you do. The ones who make jokes at your expense, who test you because they're bored and cruel and they can. I know because they did it to me, too." Marcus looked down at his shoes. "It's just part of the job." "It doesn't have to be," Clara said. She pulled out a business card, handed it to him. "This is my contact information. If you ever want to do something else, something where people see you as more than just the person bringing their food, call me. We're always looking for smart people who notice things." Marcus stared at the card like it might disappear. "You're serious?" "Completely. You don't have to decide now, but when you're ready to stop being invisible, let me know." She turned to leave, then paused. "And Marcus? When customers try to make you feel small, remember that you see them at their worst. You see them when they're drunk, when they're cruel, when they're showing off for people who don't matter. You know things about them they don't know, you know. That's not powerless. That's information." She walked out, leaving Marcus holding her card like it was a winning lottery ticket. Outside, Clara stood on the sidewalk where she'd stood 1,000 times before, waiting for the subway that would take her back to Queens. Except she wasn't going back to Queens. Wasn't going back to the studio apartment with the broken heater and the neighbors who screamed through the walls. Her driver was waiting, Ethan had insisted, ready to take her to the new place in Manhattan. 2 bedrooms, so her father could visit when he was well enough, which he wouldn't be. But Clara had bought it anyway. She got in the car and pulled out her phone. 7 missed calls from journalists wanting interviews. 4 emails from other whistleblowers asking for help. 2 messages from lawyers Grant had sent to try one last time to reduce his sentence. Clara deleted the messages from Grant's lawyers without reading them. Then she opened a new text to Ethan. "The fund. I want it active by next month. There are people who need it." His response came immediately. "Already in motion. Jennifer's handling the legal structure. You'll have full operational control." Clara smiled and put her phone away. The car pulled into traffic, carrying her away from the restaurant, away from the life she'd lived when she was nobody. She'd never be nobody again. 1 month after Grant Holloway's arrest, Clara sat in a boardroom she now partially owned and tried to remember what powerlessness felt like. It was getting harder. The Bionex acquisition that had started everything was being restructured. Ethan had brought in new scientists, legitimate ones, who'd identified 3 compounds in the failed portfolio that actually showed promise. Not the miracle cure Grant's fake data had promised, but real, incremental progress. The kind that saved lives slowly, instead of making headlines. Clara had recommended they fund it properly. Ethan had agreed without hesitation. It'll take 10 years to see returns, Jennifer had warned during the strategy meeting. Maybe longer. Most pharmaceutical development fails. Then we'll fail intelligently, Clara had said. Better than succeeding at fraud. The words had come out sharper than she'd intended, but nobody argued. They were all still learning how to work with the version of Clara who'd stopped apologizing for taking up space. Now she stood at the window of her office, her actual office, with her name on the door and everything, watching the morning rush of people who had no idea that yesterday she'd helped restructure $40 million in investments, or that last week she'd testified before a Senate committee about securities fraud, or that tomorrow she was meeting with 3 whistleblowers who needed help exposing their own versions of Grant Holloway. Her phone buzzed. A text from the facility in Westchester. Your father had a good morning. Ate breakfast. Seemed alert. Asking for someone named Annie. Clara's throat tightened. Annie was her mother, dead for 6 years. Her father's mind was reaching backward, looking for people who weren't coming back. She texted back, "Thank you. I'll visit this afternoon." Another buzz. Maya, sending a photo of her new office. First day at Goldman. They're actually paying me like I'm worth something. Still weird. Clara smiled and typed back. Get used to it. You earned it. The truth was more complicated. Maya had earned it by risking everything, by walking into Grant's operation knowing she might get caught. But she'd also earned it by being smart enough to see what needed to be done and brave enough to do it anyway. Clara was still trying to figure out which quality mattered more. The door opened without a knock. Only one person did that. We have a problem, Ethan said, walking in with the kind of energy that meant someone somewhere was about to have a very bad day. What kind of problem? The Bionex kind. Turns out the original CEO, the idiot who sold us the company, is claiming we stole his intellectual property. He's filing suit, asking for $200 million in damages. Clara felt the familiar spike of adrenaline that came with crisis. She'd missed this. The clarity that came from having a problem to solve instead of just emptiness to fill. Let me see the filing, she said. Ethan handed her his tablet. Clara read through the complaint, her mind automatically cataloging the weaknesses. The CEO was claiming they'd breached the acquisition agreement by restructuring the research priorities. That by abandoning his revolutionary cancer therapy, the one built on fraudulent data, they destroyed the value of his life's work. He's desperate, Clara said. The FDA rejection destroyed his reputation. He's trying to extract money from us before he's completely irrelevant. Can he win? Not if we prove his data was fraudulent, which we can. But it'll be expensive and public. He'll drag us through discovery, try to make us look like corporate raiders who destroyed a promising medical breakthrough. Ethan sat down heavily. Your recommendation? Clara thought about it. 6 weeks ago, she would have said crush him, destroy him the way they destroyed Grant. But she was learning that not every fight needed to end in total annihilation. Offer him $20 million to go away, she said. Structure it as a consulting agreement so it doesn't look like a settlement. He gets to save face, we get to move on. The science is worth more than the legal fees we'd spend fighting him. That's generous. That's practical, Clara corrected. He's not Grant. He's just a mediocre scientist who got in over his head and made bad choices. Destroying him won't accomplish anything except making us feel powerful. Ethan studied her. You're getting soft. I'm getting strategic, Clara said. There's a difference. He smiled slightly. Fair enough. I'll have legal draw up the offer. After he left, Clara sat in silence for a moment, getting soft. Maybe she was. Or maybe she was just learning that revenge only felt good until it was over, and then you were left with the same emptiness you'd started with. Her father had taught her that once, back when he still remembered who she was. He'd been an accountant who'd caught his boss embezzling, reported it, and watched the man go to prison. She'd asked him if it felt good, seeing the bad guy lose. He'd said no. Said it just felt like a waste. All that talent turned towards stealing, all those years spent in prison, all that damage that could never be undone. Justice wasn't the same as satisfaction, he'd told her. Sometimes you did the right thing and still felt hollow after. Clara was beginning to understand what he'd meant. The lunch meeting was at a restaurant Clara had never been able to afford before. The kind where the menu didn't have prices and the waiters spoke in hushed tones like they were handling sacred objects. She sat across from Catherine Price, Grant's former executive assistant, who looked thinner than she had in the office videos. Worn down by FBI interviews and lawyer meetings, and the weight of knowing her testimony had destroyed her boss. "Thank you for meeting me," Catherine said quietly. "I wasn't sure you'd want to." "Why wouldn't I?" "Because I worked for him. Because I knew what he was doing and I didn't stop it." Clara poured water from the crystal pitcher, taking her time. "You documented everything. That's why we won. If you hadn't kept those records—" "I kept them to protect myself," Catherine interrupted, "not to help anyone else. I watched him destroy people for years, and I did nothing because I was scared of ending up like them." "And then you did something," Clara said. "That's what matters." Catherine's hands were shaking slightly. She was 43, Clara knew from the background check. Divorced, no kids, her entire identity wrapped up in being Grant Holloway's trusted assistant. Now she was unemployed, radioactive in the industry, facing the same exile Clara had survived. "I got a letter from one of them," Catherine said. "One of the analysts Grant destroyed. She said I should have stopped him sooner, that I was complicit in everything he did." "She's right." "Maybe," Clara said. "Or maybe you were another victim who survived the only way you knew how. I don't know which. Neither do you, but beating yourself up won't change what happened." "How do you live with it?" Catherine asked. "Knowing you could have done more, been braver, fought back sooner?" Clara thought about the 4 years she'd spent invisible, serving wine to people who mocked her. About the night she'd fantasized about revenge but done nothing. About all the small moments of cowardice that had brought her to rock bottom. "I don't know that I do live with it," Clara admitted. "Some days I think I wasted 4 years being afraid. Other days I think those 4 years taught me something I needed to learn. Probably both are true." Catherine nodded slowly. "The FBI wants me to testify at Grant's trial. His lawyers are trying to argue I fabricated the documents, that I'm lying to get immunity." "Are you going to testify?" "I don't know. Part of me wants to stand up and tell the truth after years of helping him hide it. But part of me just wants to disappear. Start over somewhere he can't reach." "He can't reach you from prison," Clara pointed out. "Can't he?" Catherine looked up, and her eyes were haunted. "He has friends everywhere. People who owe him favors. What if testifying just makes me a target?" Clara understood that fear. Understood the paranoia that came from being destroyed by someone powerful. She'd spent years looking over her shoulder, waiting for Grant to finish what he'd started. "I can't promise you'll be safe," Clara said, "but I can promise you won't be alone. Testify or don't, that's your choice. But if you need help, if his people come after you, you call me. We protect our own now." Catherine's eyes filled with tears. "Why? Why would you help me after what I did?" "Because I remember what it felt like when nobody helped me," Clara said simply. "And I'm tired of that being how the world works." They finished lunch talking about other things. Catherine's plans to maybe go back to school, study something she actually cared about. Clara's work with the Whistleblower Fund. Small talk that felt like building something instead of tearing it down. When they parted ways, Catherine hugged her. Clara let her, even though physical affection still felt foreign after years of keeping everyone at arm's length. "Thank you," Catherine whispered, "for seeing me as more than just his accomplice." Clara watched her walk away and wondered if forgiveness was supposed to feel this complicated. The facility in Westchester was everything the Brooklyn place hadn't been. Clean, bright, with staff who actually smiled. Clara's father had a room with windows that opened, a view of actual trees instead of parking lots. He didn't notice any of it. "Hi, Dad," Clara said, sitting in the chair beside his bed. He was sleeping, his breathing labored. The cancer had spread to his lungs now. The doctor said weeks, maybe a month if they were lucky. Clara wasn't sure who luck was supposed to favor in this scenario. She took his hand, careful not to disturb the IV. His skin was translucent, blue veins visible beneath the surface. He'd been a big man once, strong from years of working construction before he went back to school for accounting. Now he was barely there at all. "I've been thinking about what you told me," Clara said quietly. "About justice and satisfaction. You were right. I got my revenge on Grant and it didn't fix anything. I thought it would make me whole again, but I'm still just me, still trying to figure out who that is." Her father's eyes fluttered open. For a moment, Clara thought he might recognize her. Then his gaze slid past, focusing on something that wasn't there. "The numbers don't add up," he mumbled. The same thing he always said. "Someone's cooking the books." "I know, Dad. I'm fixing it. I'm making the numbers add up. Annie, he said suddenly. Where's Annie? Clara's chest tightened. She's not here, Dad. Mom died. Remember? No, she was just here. She was... His voice trailed off, confusion replacing certainty. Clara stayed until he fell asleep again, holding his hand and pretending it mattered, pretending he knew she was there. On the drive back to Manhattan, she let herself cry. Not the quiet, controlled tears she'd perfected over the years. The ugly kind, the kind that made her driver pretend he couldn't hear. Her father was dying. Grant was going to prison. She'd built a new life from the ashes of the old one, and none of it changed the fact that some things were just broken and would stay broken no matter how hard you fought. The press conference happened on a Tuesday morning, exactly 6 weeks after Grant's arrest. 14 people stood behind Clara on the platform. The analysts Grant had destroyed brought together for the first time. Some looked successful, had rebuilt their careers in other industries, moved on. Others looked like Clara had looked 6 weeks ago, worn down, barely holding on, marked by years of struggling. Clara stepped up to the microphone, aware of every camera pointed at her. This was being live-streamed, thousands of people watching. My name is Clara Bell, she said, and her voice only shook slightly. 5 years ago, I was a senior analyst at Holloway Capital Management. I discovered evidence of fraud and reported it to my superior. Instead of investigating the fraud, Grant Holloway destroyed my career. He accused me of crimes I didn't commit, ensured I couldn't find work in finance, and forced me to survive on minimum wage while my father died slowly in a facility I couldn't afford. She paused, letting that sink in. I'm not unique. I'm not special. I'm just the one who got lucky enough to fight back. The people behind me weren't so lucky. They're accountants, teachers, waiters. They're working jobs they're overqualified for because one powerful man decided their truth was inconvenient. Clara pulled out the folder she'd shown Grant, the list of names. Grant Holloway has agreed to compensate his victims, but money doesn't fix what he broke. It doesn't give back lost years, ruined reputations, or destroyed faith in a system that's supposed to protect people who tell the truth. She looked directly at the camera. So here's what we're doing about it. Cross Industries is establishing the Truth Teller Fund, $50 million to start, with more added as needed. If you've been retaliated against for reporting fraud, corruption, or wrongdoing, if you've lost your career for telling the truth, we'll help you fight back. Legal support, financial support, whatever you need. You don't have to stay buried anymore. The reporters erupted with questions. Clara ignored them, stepping back to let the other analysts speak. One by one, they told their stories. The careers destroyed, the families broken, the years spent wondering if they'd made a mistake by trying to do the right thing. It was brutal. It was honest. It was everything the polished corporate world tried to pretend didn't exist. Afterward, Clara's phone exploded. Interview requests, think pieces about whistleblower protection, angry responses from powerful people who'd apparently destroyed a few careers themselves and didn't appreciate the attention. Ethan found her in her office, staring at the chaos. That was intense, he said. That was necessary. You know we're going to get sued, right? Half the executives in America probably have their own list of inconvenient truth tellers they've buried. They're not going to appreciate us offering those people a weapon. Good, Clara said. Let them sue. Let them try to explain in court why they're angry about a fund that helps people who told the truth. Ethan smiled. You've changed. Have I? 6 weeks ago, you were afraid to take up space. Now you're actively looking for fights. Clara thought about that. I'm not looking for fights. I'm just done running from them. Is there a difference? I think so. Running means you're still afraid. She gestured at her phone, at the explosion of attention and controversy. This is just refusing to be afraid anymore. Marcus called 3 days after the press conference. Ms. Bell? His voice was shaky. It's Marcus from the Augustine Club. You said to call if I wanted to do something else. I remember, Clara said. What happened? I got fired. A customer complained that I was uppity, said I gave him attitude when he made a joke about me being too slow. My manager believed him without asking my side. Clara felt familiar anger spike. Tell me everything, Marcus explained. The customer, a hedge fund manager Clara vaguely recognized, had been drinking, had made increasingly crude comments, had asked Marcus for financial advice as a joke, the same way Ethan had mocked Clara months ago. But Marcus had learned from Clara, had politely suggested the customer's fund was overleveraged given market volatility, had been factual and professional and completely correct. The customer had gotten him fired anyway. "Can you be at Cross Industries tomorrow morning?" Clara asked. 9 a.m. "For what?" "An interview. We're expanding the analyst team. I think you'd be a good fit." "Ms. Bell, I'm not qualified. I'm just a waiter." "You're someone who notices things," Clara interrupted. "Someone who pays attention when rich people think nobody's watching. That's more valuable than an MBA. Trust me." Marcus showed up 15 minutes early, wearing a suit that didn't fit and carrying a resume that was mostly blank. Clara interviewed him anyway, asking about the customers he'd served, the conversations he'd overheard, the patterns he'd noticed in who ordered what and when. He was sharp, observant, had unconsciously memorized the spending habits of regular customers, could identify market anxiety by tracking how many drinks they ordered before talking business. Clara hired him on the spot. "You'll start in analysis," she said. "Entry level, but with mentorship. You'll learn how to read financial statements, build models, identify fraud. It'll be hard. You'll want to quit. Don't." Marcus looked like he might cry. "Why are you doing this?" "Because someone gave me a chance when I had nothing," Clara said. "Because talent exists everywhere, but opportunity doesn't. Because the world told you that serving wine was your ceiling, and I'm tired of that being true." She set him up with training materials, assigned him a mentor, and watched him walk out looking like someone who'd just won the lottery. Ethan appeared in her doorway. "You hired the waiter?" "I hired someone observant who's been underestimated his entire life. He'll either be brilliant or he won't. Either way, we gave him a shot." "We're becoming a charity," Ethan said, but he was smiling. "We're becoming what we should have been all along," Clara corrected. "A place where talent matters more than connections." "That's idealistic." "That's how you found me," Clara pointed out. "Idealism disguised as business strategy." Ethan laughed. "Fair enough. Keep doing it. We'll either change the world or go broke trying." Grant Holloway's trial began in October, 5 months after his arrest. Clara attended every day, sat in the gallery, watching prosecutors lay out the evidence she'd helped gather. Watched Catherine testify, watched her voice shake, but her words stay steady. Watched Grant's lawyers try to paint it all as aggressive business practices rather than criminal fraud. The jury wasn't buying it. On day 12, the prosecution played recordings of Grant's phone calls, conversations with shell company executives that were really just Grant talking to himself, instructions to falsify surveys, to hide contamination data, to move money before investigators could track it. Grant's face stayed blank, but Clara saw his hands tighten on the table. The defense called character witnesses, people who'd known Grant for decades, who swore he was honest and ethical, people who'd profited from his frauds and were now trying to protect their own reputations. Clara recognized some of them. Investors who'd made millions from Grant's previous scams, who'd looked the other way as long as the returns stayed high. She wanted to stand up and scream at them, wanted to force them to acknowledge the people Grant had destroyed. But this wasn't her stage. This was the prosecution's show, and they were running it perfectly. On day 18, the prosecution called Clara to the stand. She'd prepared for this, had run through her testimony with lawyers a dozen times. But walking to the witness box, swearing to tell the truth, looking at Grant across the courtroom, none of that preparation mattered. "Ms. Bell," the prosecutor said, "can you describe your relationship with the defendant?" Clara took a breath. "I worked for Grant Holloway for 3 years. He was my mentor, my boss, and eventually the person who destroyed my career." "Can you explain what you mean by destroyed your career?" Clara told the story. The fraud she'd discovered, the report she'd made, the accusations that followed, the SEC investigation, the blacklisting, the 4 years spent invisible. Grant's lawyer objected repeatedly. Clara kept talking. "Did you believe the defendant's accusations against you were truthful?" the prosecutor asked. "No, I knew they were lies designed to protect his fraud. But knowing something and proving it are different things. He had power. I didn't. So his lies became truth, and my truth became irrelevant." "And how did that make you feel?" Clara looked at Grant. He was watching her, his face expressionless. "It made me feel powerless," Clara said, "like the world had rules that only applied to people like me. Like truth didn't matter if you didn't have money to defend it. It made me want to give up. But you didn't give up. No, I got angry instead, and anger, it turns out, is more useful than despair. The defense cross-examination was brutal. Grant's lawyer tried to paint Clara as vindictive, suggested she'd fabricated evidence out of spite, implied she was profiting from Grant's downfall. Clara stayed calm, answered every question honestly, refused to be rattled. When she stepped down, she felt lighter, like she'd finally said everything she'd needed to say. The verdict came 3 days later, guilty on all counts. Grant showed no reaction, just stood when the judge asked him to stand, sat when told to sit, like he was watching someone else's trial. Sentencing was scheduled for December. Clara didn't stay for the celebration, didn't join the prosecutors and FBI agents who'd worked the case, just walked out of the courthouse into the cold November air and breathed. It was over. Finally over. And she still felt hollow. Her father died 2 weeks before Christmas. Clara was with him. She'd been spending every afternoon at the facility, reading to him even though he didn't understand the words. The nurses said hearing was the last sense to go. Clara hoped they were right, hoped some part of him knew she was there. He went quietly. One breath, then nothing. No dramatic last words, no final moment of clarity. Just a gentle exit from a body that had been failing for months. Clara held his hand and cried, and the nurses gave her privacy. The funeral was small. Her father's friends from his accounting days, some distant cousins Clara barely knew. Ethan came, which surprised her. Jennifer came too, and Marcus, and even Maya drove in from Connecticut. They stood in the cold cemetery while a minister said words that meant nothing about a man who'd taught Clara that numbers told stories if you knew how to read them. Afterward, Clara stood alone at the grave. "I made the numbers add up, Dad," she said quietly. "Like you taught me. Found the fraud, exposed it, made the bad guys pay. You would have been proud." The wind picked up, scattering dead leaves across the headstone. "I miss you, even though you forgot me years ago, even though you spent the last year thinking I was someone else. I miss the version of you that taught me to be better than the people who try to cheat." She left flowers, white lilies, her mother's favorite, then walked back to the car where Ethan was waiting. "You okay?" he asked. "No," Clara said honestly. "But I will be." Grant's sentencing happened on a gray Tuesday in December. The judge gave him 18 years. With good behavior, he'd be out in 15. He'd be 77 if he lived that long. Clara watched him being led away in handcuffs and felt nothing. No triumph, no satisfaction, just a tired recognition that this chapter was finally closing. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed her. She gave them nothing, just pushed through to the car and let Ethan's driver take her back to the office. Jennifer was waiting with coffee and a stack of new cases for the Truth Teller Fund. "3 new applications today," Jennifer said. An EPA scientist who reported contamination cover-ups, a hospital administrator who exposed insurance fraud, and a teacher who reported test score manipulation. Clara looked at the files. More people who told the truth and paid for it. More people who needed help fighting back. "What do you want to do?" Jennifer asked. Clara thought about her father, about the years she'd lost, about Grant in prison and Marcus starting his new career and Catherine trying to rebuild her life. "Help them," Clara said. "Help all of them. That's the whole point." 6 months later, Clara stood in the same restaurant where it had all started. The Augustine Club had new owners. The old management had been replaced after the story broke about how they'd treated their staff. Marcus's firing had become a minor scandal, proof that the exclusive world of Manhattan fine dining was built on the same exploitation as everywhere else. Clara wasn't here as a guest. She was here for a different reason. She found the manager, a new woman who'd been promoted from within, and handed her an envelope. "What's this?" the manager asked. "Scholarships," Clara said, "for any staff member who wants to go back to school. Business, finance, whatever they want to study. Cross Industries will cover tuition, books, living expenses. They just have to apply." The manager's eyes widened. "Ms. Bell, this is incredibly generous." "It's practical," Clara corrected. "You have smart people working here, people who notice things, who understand human behavior, who know how to read a room. That's valuable. We're just giving them a chance to use it somewhere that pays better than minimum wage." She left before the manager could thank her. walked out into the Manhattan evening, into the life she'd built from the ruins of the old one. Her phone buzzed. A text from Ethan. The Bionex compound just passed Phase 2 trials, looking good for FDA approval. You were right about funding it properly. Clara smiled. Small victories. That's what life was built from. Not grand moments of triumph, but small choices to do better than the people who'd come before. She thought about Grant in prison, about her father in the ground, about the version of herself who'd served wine and pretended not to notice when powerful people mocked her. That woman was gone. Not erased, but transformed. Changed by fire into something harder and softer at the same time. A waiter, young, nervous, new, hurried past her carrying a tray of expensive wine. He caught her eye and smiled tentatively, like he recognized her from the news. Clara smiled back. You're doing great, she said. He looked confused. Thank you? Keep noticing things, Claire said. And when you're ready for something different, look me up. She handed him her card and walked away. The world hadn't changed. Power still mattered. Money still talked. People like Grant still existed, still destroyed careers, still got away with it more often than not. But Clara had changed, had learned that powerlessness was sometimes a choice, that being underestimated was an advantage if you knew how to use it, that revenge was empty, but justice could be satisfying if you defined it as making things better instead of just making bad people suffer. She got in her car that she owned, that nobody could take away, and pulled up the next case file for the Truth Teller Fund. A journalist who'd been fired for reporting on corporate pollution, a factory worker who'd lost his job for reporting safety violations, a paralegal who'd exposed her firm's billing fraud, people who'd told the truth and paid the price. Clara would help them fight back. Not because she was a hero, not because she was trying to save the world, but because she remembered what it felt like to be powerless, and she decided that she was done with that feeling, for herself and for everyone else who'd been told they didn't matter. The car pulled into traffic. Manhattan glittered around her, full of people chasing their own versions of success. Clara wasn't chasing anymore. She'd found what she was looking for. Not power, not revenge, not even justice, really. Just the simple knowledge that she was worth more than the people who tried to erase her had believed. That talent mattered. That truth mattered. That being kind was more important than being powerful, but being powerful helped you be kind to more people. Her phone buzzed again. Another case. Another person who needed help. Clara read the file and started making notes. She had work to do.